The Forbiddance Meeting. The mining station floated above a dying red star, its giant rings turning slowly in the cold silence of space. Inside, long steel corridors echoed with the hum of machinery, and the air smelled of oil and metal. In one of those dark corridors, an alien girl named Lyra moved quickly, her heart beating fast. Her skin was pale silver, her eyes glowing faint blue in the shadows, and every step she took was a risk. Her people had strict laws. No alien was allowed to speak with a human, not even a single word. But tonight, Lyra was breaking that law. She reached the old cargo bay at the far end of the station, a place no one used anymore. The lights flickered. Dust floated in the air, and broken crates were stacked in the corners. She stopped and listened. No footsteps. No voices, only the distant hum of the engines. Then she saw him, Captain Elias, a human cargo pilot, stood near a pile of containers, waiting. His dark jacket was worn, and his eyes carried the look of a man who had seen too many dangers. When he saw her, he smiled, a smile that made her forget the rules for just a moment. "You're late," Elias said softly. "I had to take a longer path," Lyra replied, looking around. "The guards are everywhere tonight." He nodded, understanding the risk. For months they had met in secret, sharing stories, learning about each other's worlds. He told her about the green forests of Earth, the blue oceans, the sky full of clouds. She told him about her home, silver cities under glass domes, where the air shimmered with light. They both knew they were crossing a dangerous line, but they couldn't stop. Somehow, in the cold emptiness of space, they had found warmth in each other. Elias stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I got the route ready. We can leave in 3 days," he whispered. Lyra's eyes widened. 3 days? "Yes, I found a gap in the patrol schedule. We take my ship, head to the neutral planets, and no one will follow." Lyra felt her chest tighten, hope mixing with fear. Leaving meant freedom, but it also meant exile from her people forever. Still, when she looked at Elias, she knew her choice. But before she could answer, a sharp sound cut through the air, the wail of an alarm. Red lights flashed along the walls, bathing everything in a warning glow. Lyra's head snapped toward the door. "They found us," she breathed. Elias grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the side exit. But the heavy steel door slid shut before they reached it, locking them inside. From the other side came the sound of boots, many boots, marching in perfect rhythm, the alien guards. The first one through the main door was tall and armored, his helmet reflecting the red light. Behind him came 3 more, weapons raised, their glowing staffs humming with energy. "Lyra of the Silver Court," the leader's voice boomed. "You are under arrest for treason against your people." Lyra's hand shook, but she lifted her chin. "I have done nothing wrong," she said, though her voice was trembling. The guard ignored her words and stepped forward. 2 soldiers grabbed her by the arms, their grips cold and unyielding. Elias stepped between them. "Let her go," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. The guard looked at him with something close to disgust. "This is not your concern, human." Elias clenched his fists, ready to fight. But Lyra shook her head slightly. "No, don't," she whispered. "They will kill you." The guards began pulling her toward the door, and Elias could feel her slipping away. He wanted to grab her, to run, to fight them all. But there were too many. One wrong move and she would be hurt, or worse. As they dragged her out, Lyra turned her head, her eyes locking on his. She tried to smile, but it broke halfway, turning into something filled with fear. "I will find you," Elias said, his voice breaking through the noise of the alarms. Her lips moved in silent reply, words he could not hear. Then she was gone, swallowed by the shadows of the corridor. The alarms kept screaming, and the cold emptiness of the cargo bay closed around him. Elias stood alone, his fist still clenched, his breath heavy. He knew what her arrest meant. The Silver Court would judge her harshly, and their punishments were cruel. She would be sent far away, to some place from which she could never return. The thought burned in him like fire, and in that moment, Elias made a promise to himself. No matter where they took her, no matter what danger stood in his way, he would get her back. Far away, the red star outside the station pulsed weakly, sending a dim light through the steel walls. The mining station kept turning, silent and uncaring, but in one man's heart, something had been set in motion. A storm was coming, and nothing in the galaxy could stop it. Asterisk judgment of the High Council far away from the mining station. In the heart of the Silver Court's capital, a massive glass dome rose above the black ocean. Inside, the High Council chambers shimmered with silver light, the floor made of living crystal that pulsed like a heartbeat. 12 alien elders sat in a half-circle, their robes woven with strands of starlight, their eyes cold and bright. At the center on her knees was Lyra. Chains of glowing energy wrapped around her wrists. She kept her head low, but her mind was racing. She knew the Council's reputation. Mercy was a word they had erased from their language long ago. A tall elder with a crown of light stood, his voice echoing in the chamber. "Lyra of the Silver Court," he said, "you are charged with betrayal of our sacred laws." The crystal floor under her feet flashed red, marking her as guilty before the trial even began. "You spoke to a human," the elder continued. "You shared words, thoughts, and emotions. This is contamination of our bloodline." Every elder's gaze burned into her. She tried to speak, but the chains tightened. When she moved, sending a jolt of pain through her arms, outside the chamber, whispers traveled like wind through the streets. Citizens of the Silver Court crowded around the dome, staring up at the glowing walls. Some spat on the ground at the mention of her name. Others whispered that she was brave, foolish maybe, but brave. The city was divided, but the Council cared nothing for the people's opinion. They saw only the law, and the law was a blade, in a small tavern on the edge of the spaceport. Elias sat at a table, staring at the message flickering on his wristcom. It was a smuggler's code, short, hidden between trading schedules, but clear enough for him to understand. "They're taking her to Vorther." The word hit him like a punch. Vorther, the frozen prison world, wrapped in storms so violent that even light struggled to escape. No prisoner had ever returned. No ship had ever gone there without vanishing into the ice. Elias gripped the table until the wood creaked. Every pilot in the galaxy knew about Vorther. It was not just a prison, it was a place the Silver Court sent those they wanted erased from history. Even if someone survived the cold, the beasts beneath the ice would finish what the storms began. But in his mind, Elias could still see Lyra's eyes from that last moment. That was enough. He didn't care if it was suicide. He was going after her. Back in the council chamber, the elders began their final words. "She will be sent to Vorther," the crown-wearing elder declared. The floor glowed blue now, the color of exile. Lyra's chains tightened again as guards approached. She lifted her head for the first time, looking directly at the elders. Her voice was steady but cold. "One day," she said, "you will learn that walls cannot hold back the truth." The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then the guards pulled her away, her steps echoing against the crystal floor until the sound faded. The verdict spread through the city like fire. Some celebrated. Others hid their faces in shame. Above it all, the black ocean kept moving under the glass dome, endless and cold. The Silver Court thought the matter was finished. But in the shadows of the spaceport, a human pilot was already making plans. And in the frozen storms of Vorther, something ancient waited, something even the High Council feared. The journey to Vortharth, stolen ship groaned as Elias powered it up, its old engines coughing like a wounded beast. The hull was scratched and patched with mismatched metal plates, but it could still fly, and that was all he needed. He set a course for Vorther, knowing that between here and there lay more than just empty space. The Silver Court had patrol routes, mines hidden in asteroid belts, and traps designed to catch smugglers before they even saw them. The first day was quiet, too quiet. The stars passed by like cold watchers, their light sharp against the black. Elias didn't trust the silence in space. Quiet often meant something was stalking you. He checked his scanners, but they showed nothing. Still, he kept a hand near the controls. Ready to run, by the second day, he reached the nebula of ghosts. It was a swirling wall of blue and white gas, lit from within by strange flashes. Old pilots told stories about this place. Voices on the come that belonged to the dead. Ships drifting without crews. Lights that led you in circles until your fuel was gone. Elias didn't believe in ghosts, but as the ship entered the mist, the temperature inside began to drop. The lights flickered, the radio crackled, and then he heard it, her voice. Elias. It was Lyra's voice, soft but clear. He spun in his chair, staring at the empty cabin. Her voice came again. Closer this time. Turn back. You can't reach me. He gritted his teeth, knowing it was impossible. The silver cord could have planted a signal to break him. But part of him still wanted to answer, to believe. He pushed the engines harder, cutting through the clouds of gas. Shapes moved outside the windows, long, thin shadows that didn't match the scanner readings. One of them slid across the hull, making a low scraping sound. The lights dimmed again, and for a moment he felt something pressing against his mind. Whispers in a language he didn't know, cold and heavy. He forced himself to focus on the controls. Not today, he muttered. I've got someone waiting for me. When the ship finally broke free of the nebula, the silence returned, but this time it felt different, not empty, but watched. He checked the scanners again and froze. A massive alien warship was right in front of him. Its black surface absorbing the starlight. It had no visible weapons, but its size alone was enough to crush his ship in seconds. A voice came over the come, deep, calm, and cold. Human vessel. You are entering restricted space. Power down. And prepare for boarding. Elias stared at the warship and felt his pulse slow. This was the moment, if they took him now. Lyra would be lost forever. He reached for the thruster controls. Negative, he said, his voice flat. I'm not stopping. The warship's lights flared to life, and the space between them filled with blinding white fire. Asterisk, the battle. In the black, the first blast hit near the rear thrusters, shaking the ship so hard, Elias almost hit his head on the controls. Warning lights flashed red across the dashboard, and the smell of burning wires filled the air. The warship didn't move fast, but it didn't need to. It was a predator, and Elias was just prey caught in the open. Another shot lit up the darkness, tearing a hole in the asteroid field ahead. Chunks of rock spun away into the black, glowing. With molten edges, Elias gripped the controls tighter, weaving between the debris. He couldn't outrun the warship. It was too big, too well armed. But maybe, just maybe, he could outthink it. He dove the ship into a cluster of massive asteroids, the kind that drifted so slowly they almost seemed frozen in space. The warship followed, its shadow swallowing the light. Elias flicked off his main thrusters, letting the ship drift silently between the rocks. Without his engines on, his ship blended into the cold stone. The warship slowed, scanning the field. Elias reached for the emergency boosters, small, powerful thrusters meant for escape pods. If he timed it right, he could slingshot around a large asteroid and get behind the warship. He took a deep breath, counting the seconds as the warship's lights swept past his hiding place. 3, 2, 1. The boosters roared to life, and the ship shot forward, spinning around a jagged rock. For a brief moment, the warship's massive hull filled his entire view. Elias opened fire, not at the warship itself, but at a nearby asteroid. The blast shattered it into hundreds of glowing fragments. The debris slammed into the warship's side, rattling its shields. It wasn't enough to destroy it, but it bought him seconds, and seconds were all he needed. He pushed his engines to maximum, diving into a narrow gap between two asteroids. Behind him, the warship's guns fired again, but the blasts hit rock instead of metal. Elias' ship scraped along the edge of a massive boulder, sparks flying past the cockpit. Then suddenly, open space was ahead, and at the far edge, a swirling hole of blue and white light. A collapsing wormhole, unstable and deadly, the kind of thing no sane pilot would enter. The warship's voice came over the comm again. "Human vessel, you cannot escape." Elias smiled grimly. "Watch me," he said, and dived into the wormhole. The world twisted around him, stars stretching into long streaks, colors bending into shapes his mind could barely understand. The ship groaned, metal straining as gravity pulled in every direction at once. For a moment, he thought the hull would tear apart. Then, with a final lurch, the ship burst out into the black again. Ahead of him, floating like a frozen jewel, was Vorther. Its surface glowed faintly under the light of a distant sun. Its swirling storms casting shadows across the ice. Elias exhaled slowly, gripping the controls. He had made it through the nebula, past the warship, and through a collapsing wormhole. Now came the hard part, getting Lyra out alive. The prison world Vorther was not just cold. It was alive with the kind of cold that could kill a man in minutes. The storms moved like living things, their winds screaming across the ice with voices that sounded almost human. Elias' ship shuddered as it entered the atmosphere, frost crawling across the windows. He wore a thick survival suit, but even inside the cockpit, he could feel the air trying to bite through the layers. The ground came into view, endless ice fields, broken only by jagged black cliffs. And there, built into the largest cliff face, was the prison, a fortress of black steel, its walls bristling with towers and blinking sensors. It looked less like a building and more like a scar on the world. A place meant to hold more than just bodies. It held hope itself prisoner. Elias landed his ship in a narrow canyon a few kilometers away, hidden under the shadow of a frozen ridge. He couldn't risk using engines to get closer. The sensors would pick up the heat. Instead, he began the walk, his boots crunching on the ice, every step echoing into the silence. The wind cut into him like knives, and once or twice he saw movement under the snow, shapes swimming deep beneath the frozen surface. Following his steps, he kept moving, ignoring the prickle at the back of his neck. By the time he reached the prison's outer wall, his visor was covered in frost. Through the fogged glass, he saw watchtowers scanning the horizon, drones circling overhead like black birds. He waited for the gap in their pattern, 15 seconds where the drones passed on opposite sides. When it came, he moved, pressing himself against the icy metal of the wall. He found a small maintenance hatch, its lock covered in frost. Pulling out a portable heater, he thought it just enough to pry it open. Inside, the air was warmer but smelled of oil and rust. The narrow maintenance tunnel sloped downward, lit only by the faint glow of red emergency strips. Elias moved quietly, every sound amplified in the silence. Somewhere above, heavy boots marched in rhythm, guards changing shifts. He reached the end of the tunnel and found a grate. Peering through, he saw a long hallway lined with holding cells, and there, at the far end, was Lyra. She was thinner than before, her silver skin dull under the weak lights. Her hands were bound in glowing cuffs, and her head was bowed. But when she lifted her eyes, she saw him, and for a second, they both froze. Her lips moved. Shaping his name, he pressed a finger to his lips. Signaling silence, she nodded, but her eyes flicked toward the corner. Elias followed her gaze and saw a security camera turning slowly. He ducked out of sight just as the camera swept past. His heart pounded in his ears. If the guards caught him here, both of them would be sent deeper into the prison, and deeper in Vorther meant death. He waited for the camera to turn again before crawling out of the tunnel. The cold metal floor was slick under his boots, but he moved fast. When he reached her cell, Lyra leaned close to the bars, her voice barely a whisper. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "Too late for that," Elias replied, his hands already working on the lock. Before he could finish, the alarm blared. The red lights flared brighter, and the sound of rushing footsteps filled the hall. The price of freedom. The alien fighters spread across the sky like black wings, their formation closing around Elias' ship. Each one was small but fast, armed with weapons that could slice through his hull in seconds. Lyra gripped the armrests, her eyes fixed on the swarm ahead. "They won't let us leave Vorther alive," she said. Elias didn't answer, but his mind was racing. He couldn't outrun them. He couldn't outgun them. But maybe, just maybe, he could make them chase him into a place even they feared. "Hold on," Elias said, turning the ship toward the storm belt that wrapped around Vorther's north pole. The fighters followed immediately, their weapons flashing. Bolts of blue fire streaked past. Close enough to shake the hull, Elias weaved between towering columns of ice, the storm wind screaming against the ship. Lightning arced through the clouds, blinding in its brightness, but Elias kept going, deeper into the storm, inside the clouds. Visibility dropped to nothing. The fighters spread out, trying to flank him. Elias triggered the ship's emergency beacon, letting it pulse just enough to draw them closer. Then he cut the power completely. The ship drifted in the dark, hidden among the storm's static. Lyra turned to him, her voice low. "They'll find us if we stay still," Elias smiled faintly. "That's the plan." Through the storm's flashing light, shadows moved, huge, shifting shapes. Vorther's sky beasts, creatures that lived inside the permanent storms. Their bodies were like floating mountains of ice and flesh, with eyes that glowed deep blue. The alien fighters didn't see them until it was too late. One of the creatures lunged, its massive jaws closing over a fighter and crushing it like paper. The others scattered, firing wildly, but the storm beasts moved faster, tearing through their formation. Elias powered the ship back on and pushed the engines to full. They shot upward, breaking free of the clouds and into open space. The few fighters that survived didn't follow. They hovered at the storm's edge, unwilling to enter again. Lyra leaned back in her seat, her voice shaking. "You risked both of us." Elias glanced at her. "I told you, I'd go anywhere for you." The stars stretched ahead, the black of space feeling almost calm after Vorther's storms. But as they crossed into neutral territory, Lyra's eyes darkened. "They'll keep coming, Elias," she said. "The High Council will never forgive this." He smiled without looking away from the stars. "Then we stay ahead of them, far behind." In the Silver Court's capital, the High Council watched the recording of the escape. They did not speak, but in the silence, an older figure stepped forward, a faint smile on her lips. "Let him run," she said. "He's heading exactly where we want him to go."